I still remember this pretty well, probably because it's hard to forget. Us four, me, Kevin, Rob, and Mark, we were close friends since childhood. We used to go camping together. We've known each other forever, but as time went on, we all kind of went our own ways. But we always made sure to catch up during our annual camping trip. That year, we hit the road late. By lunchtime, we were on our way to Piney Hollows. It's this gorgeous camping place next to the Greenbrier River, only a few hours away from Springfield, Illinois. I really loved Piney Hollows. It was full of different trees like oaks, pines, and maples everywhere you looked. It was super quiet too. You couldn't hear any city noise, just nature sounds. We found a decent place to camp by the river, where the ground was flat and the trees gave us some cover. While Kevin and Mark were busy setting up the tents, Rob and I went to get some firewood. It was a quick job. Once we got back to our camp, the tents were almost done. Of course, we all made fun of each other for taking so long. We were just goofing around like typical boys. When it got dark, you could see shadows around our tents. We roasted marshmallows on the fire and handed out beers, then started swapping stories. Some were funny, some brought back memories, and some were too crazy to believe. We were up late, just chatting and cracking jokes. Now you need to remember that Piney Hollows is a really quiet and peaceful place. You could just sit and relax to the sound of the birds and the breeze. We definitely weren't ready for what happened next. So we were just there to chill, have a good laugh, and hang out together. The woods looked different under the faint light of our camping lanterns. What was green and nice in the daytime started to look dark and spooky. It was way past midnight, and we were still up, just chatting and cracking jokes near the nearly out fire. Suddenly we heard this strange, low sound that seemed to come from deep within the forest, and it bounced off the trees around us. We couldn't figure out where it was coming from. It didn't sound like a bird or any animal we knew, not even a fox or a bear. That noise really put us off. You could tell by looking at everyone. They were confused, surprised, and a bit scared, just like I was. So there we were, four old buddies camping. We didn't have any idea about the scary stuff that was going to happen that night. Looking back, we should have got out of there immediately, but for some reason we thought it'd be a good idea to track down where this weird noise was coming from. Maybe it was the booze or just us being curious and careless, but we went to find out what caused the noise without second-guessing ourselves. We used to run around these woods all the time as kids. We know every kind of animal you'd find here. We kept going further into the forest. The only noise we could hear was our footsteps, low voices, and leaves crunching under our feet. All we had for light were our flashlights scanning the area. We heard the noise again, louder now and pretty creepy. I won't lie, it really made me scared. I was not just scared, I was totally freaked out, like you would be when you knew something was hunting you. Suddenly, those creepy yellow eyes appeared out of nowhere. We finally found that beast we were searching for. It's hard to explain, but it was freaky. It stood up like a person, but it was nothing like one. It was like a huge lizard, around 9 feet tall with really bright yellow eyes. Its body kind of resembled a human's, but its face... Man, it was terrifying. It looked like a dinosaur or just a super weird mutant lizard. Perhaps we were scared, drunk, or just petrified, but we didn't move. We just looked straight into its eyes. This creepy creature looked right back at us, its face turning into a scary grin as it showed off its sharp teeth. Then, it jumped at us. In that moment, we turned into a bunch of terrified kids. Kevin was in front as we ran back to our campsite, freaked out by every noise we heard. In a rush, we got into our cars, hearts pounding, barely able to catch our breath, and just drove off, even left all our gear behind. I took one more look back and saw those glowing eyes in the mirror. Once we got back to the city, where it was all light and we knew our way around, we stopped. We were speechless, just staring at each other, shocked. What just happened? Was it even real? So we saw a monster from a legend, or maybe we imagined it because we were drunk. Who knows? But there's no denying one thing. We went into the forest like guys on a fun trip, wanting to relive the good old days. But when we came out, we were scared like never before. It was a shared experience that was totally different from anything we'd ever had. So that's what happened. We've all stayed away from forests and didn't leave the city after that. You can say we were traumatized. We finally stopped fooling ourselves that it was just an animal. We can't forget what that thing looked like, and we're still scared to death whenever we dream about it. Since then, we've started hanging out more and having barbecue parties in our backyards, talking about the stuff we messed up and all the fear we felt because of what happened at Piney Hollows. This was like 5 years ago. My wife and I loved going for drives late at night. We usually picked quiet roads where there were hardly any cars. We kind of made it our thing. Just wanted to escape daily life and chill by myself. It was quiet, with the radio playing some old music. We went to some isolated places. I really can't remember what those places were named right off the bat. We were just cruising around, not going anywhere specific. The road was long and lined with thick trees on both sides, but we liked it. It felt like we were in our own little world. We enjoyed pointing out stuff to each other and speculating what folks might be up to in their homes. So, if you've been married as long as me, you'll get that these small moments we spend together are special. It's kind of like an unwritten rule, something we always look forward to. By the time we started our drive, it was already night. The sky was clear with stars and the moon was shining bright. I might say it was a great night, until it wasn't. We were just about to turn a sharp corner when I first smelt it. There was this really harsh, nasty smell. You know, normally you'd smell wet soil, leaves, or maybe a skunk if you're not lucky, but this smell was something else. It stunk bad. My wife saw I was bothered and pulled a face, immediately winding up her window. Look, I've spent a good chunk of my life in the woods, and trust me, I've encountered all sorts of smells. But this was totally different, something off. Trust me, no good ever comes from a smell like that. Just around the corner I slowed down, trying to figure out that god-awful smell that was ruining our peaceful night. Then we heard it, a deep growl that echoed through the quiet night. You could hear it over the truck's engine, actually. My wife gave me this surprised look, and I'm pretty sure I looked the same way. The weird thing was, this thing didn't give a damn about the truck, the headlights, me honking, or even shouting at it to get off the road. I saw two bright yellow eyes staring from the darkness where the truck's headlights were shining. They were taller than any normal forest creature. Could it be a bear on its back legs? But I knew that wasn't right. I suddenly felt really scared. Man, you won't believe what happened next. The eyes were moving, like bobbing up and down like it was attached to something that's walking. We just stood there staring. Then a shadowy figure showed up, lit from behind by our car headlights. My wife suddenly gasped beside me in fear. The figure was huge, wider than any man I've seen before. But what made it really scary was its bizarre shape. It looked like a dog, but it was standing on two legs. It had big arms that reached down to its sides, ending in feet that seemed stretched out with claws that scraped the ground. It had a bent back and strong legs, which only made it look scarier. And its face, yuck. It had a snout like a dog, with yellow eyes that looked really smart, and that was what scared me the most. It was looking at us the same way we were looking at it. It looked like it was drooling. Despite being hunched over, it still managed to walk on two legs. Its legs sort of looked like a dog's, but like a dog that could walk like humans. I was really scared. This thing was super furry, with some bits of fur sticking out more in some places. It was really dark, almost blackish brown. You couldn't really tell in the faint light from the truck's headlights. My wife barely got out, "Let's go!" She was shaking so bad. "Go now!" But I was stuck. My hands couldn't let go of the wheel. My eyes were fixed on the scary-looking thing moving across the road, not bothered by our car or the headlights on it. I really can't tell how long we sat there. It felt like time had stopped. At last, the creature went into the heavy forest, leaving behind a nasty smell and a memory that we'd never be able to forget or even describe, really. We drove home that night, but didn't talk much during the rest of the trip. We tried to figure out what we saw back there on the empty road, but we couldn't. Over the next few weeks, I went back to that spot a few times, but didn't find anything. That night changed something between us. Each pair of eyes we couldn't see glowing on the road at night. Every strange movement in the forest made us remember our scary experience with that terrifying creature. It was also the same night our calm drive stopped being so relaxed. I remember back in 2019, during a summer in Oregon where we had a really big fire. I was right there in the middle of it all, working as a firefighter. Everyone had to chip in. It's totally draining. Really, it's scary. No matter how many fires I've gone through, each one takes all you've got. Wildfires, well, they're something else. They're so big, it's really hard to describe. You gotta see it yourself to believe it. I even find it unbelievable sometimes. When the trees burn, they turn into ash, making the smoke so thick that you can still taste it in your throat hours after work. The wild feels so pure and untouched that it becomes hard to believe when all that turns into thin sculptures of charcoal. I don't want to talk about the widespread destruction caused by wildfires. What I want to tell you is about a specific event that happened one day when my crew and I had to go deep into the woods in Oregon. We were called for help because the local department couldn't handle a fire that had gotten too big. The situation had gotten so bad that it was declared a state of emergency. As we went further into the thick woods, the ground got rougher. It was covered with all this dried-up greenery that would easily fuel any spreading fire. Huge trees were towering above us. It had been a heck of a long day. The fire was tough to beat. Despite our gear and tools, every time we managed to control it, it felt like a real win. We worked hard for hours until we finally could take a break. We each ate and rested a bit before going back to watch the area again. I walked along where the fire had been. The burnt leftover plant stuff crunched under my shoes as I moved around. The only other thing I could hear was the sound of the hot wood cooling down, but even that sound got quieter the further I walked. In the quietness after the fire, something grabbed my attention. Over there, in the bushes, I found a mark. A big footprint. Bigger than any I'd ever seen. I've been around enough fires while hiking to know their signs. But this time was different. I pushed away the bit of fear I felt and chose to follow these signs, curiosity outweighing the usual caution someone would have. I used a flashlight to guide me, but its light barely cut through the hazy dark. The forest was super quiet, except for the distant noise of burning trees. While walking deeper into it, the smell got stronger. It was like rotten meat left in the heat. You wouldn't expect this kind of smell after a forest fire. Then out of the blue, I heard a rough growling sound. It was pretty scary. It felt like it was shaking the forest floor. Then a super loud huff came. After that, nothing. I kind of stepped back, my gut telling me to run. I looked around for what was making that noise, but didn't spot anything. We typically don't see animals out here unless they were hurt in the fire. Usually, all the healthy ones have run off by the time we get here. With a deep breath, I got a good grip on my flashlight and continued into the dark. I kept going deeper into the dark woods and the smell was getting worse. Then I saw something in the shadows. I shone my flashlight on a huge thing standing just a few yards away. I was so scared I couldn't breathe. It was huge, probably over 8 feet. This thing was like something from a scary tale, not what I was expecting to see at all. A big, bulky thing with a large jaw was right there in the light from my flashlight. It had red and brown fur all over. Its head kind of blended into its huge body with big shoulders and arms. I shone my flashlight up and saw 2 glowy eyes set way up high in its forehead. It was like seeing a mix of a man and some kind of animal. It let out this deep grunt that bounced off the trees. The place got really quiet, really fast. I was super scared, like every inch of me was freaked out, but I didn't move. I stood there facing this scary creature. Then, after what felt like forever, it just turned around. Surprisingly, it moved gracefully for something so big and vanished into the dark part of the forest. The rest of the night is kinda hazy. I just snapped out of it and went through the motions, you know? Only by morning did it hit me what really happened. I even started doubting if mythical creatures could be real. I've been thinking, is a wildfire just a disaster, Or does it also uncover things we wouldn't see otherwise? That night really made me see things differently. You know, I joke around with my friends about raccoons messing up our camps. But I haven't told anyone this story before because I was worried about people making fun of me. I never really believed in all those Bigfoot stories, thought they were all made up. But now I'm not sure. I think there might be something out there. There's this really old, unused house behind the place where I grew up. You can tell it's been there for ages because there's actually a tree growing right from the patio and through the roof. We used to call it the tree house when we were kids. Despite the flaky paint and the roof caving in some of the rooms, we used to love hanging out there when we didn't have anything better to do. The woods got more exciting with that house there. We always told each other tales about that house and the people who might have lived in it. We guessed they were all cowboys, considering how old the house was. We joked they must be cowboys or criminals or both, because why else would anyone live so far away from everything? We often said they might be hiding their guns or stolen stuff somewhere around their property. We dug some holes hoping to make our dreams feel more real, but all we found were bones. But they weren't human bones. They were too tiny. We thought they might be some kind of animal bones, but we soon lost interest. As we hit our teenage years, we used the house more for drinking and smoking. The old faded paintings on the walls, which we never really paid attention to, ended up as dart targets. The house was always a mess. It's not like we were making it worse than it already was. Our games only left a few notches on the walls, which was nothing compared to all the scratches. We always thought those scratches were weird from the start. There were 4 big scratches going from one room to another. It looked like someone had jabbed a giant fork into the walls and scrawled it all the way around. We had no clue who or what could have done it, but the day we found out and saw it with our own eyes, we never went back to that treehouse. One night, someone knocked on the door. We quickly hid our stuff under the lopsided couch we'd found and brought in from the street. Everybody was there, so it wasn't one of us who was knocking. We thought no one else knew about this place. We guessed our folks were outside. But when we opened the door, ready to apologize, there was nobody there. We picked up some flashlights and checked around the house, thinking someone was messing with us. We were all hyped and ready to show what we got. After being scared thinking we were trapped, we decided to find the one playing tricks on us and make sure they wouldn't do it again. But honestly, we had no clue what we were after. We had no idea what was in store for us. We also didn't realize our worries were just starting. Suddenly, we started hearing something from the house that sounded like a shovel being dragged on a stone floor. We wondered, how did they manage to get past us and into the house? We had no clue. We just didn't bother. All we wanted was to find them and tell them that this was our spot. It felt like a big deal back then. We hadn't seen it until then. When we got back in, we saw it. It was clearly full grown because it was as tall as our dad's. But it wasn't a guy. Also, it wasn't even human. Its head was bald and huge. Its eyes were big and set too far apart. It had a big, wide-open mouth, and it was drooling with lots of tiny, sharp teeth. Its skin was creepy white and sticky, like melted candy out in the sun. But its hands were the absolute worst. Its hands were at the end of its arms, but they looked freakishly longer, like as if each finger had been stretched. They were thrice their normal size, plus each finger had sharp nails at its end, and it was using these sharp nails to scratch the walls. They were making a path, 4 rows wide, from one corner to the other. We got in the way when we walked in. It turned its dark eyes towards us, hissing and growling. I don't know who puked, but one of us definitely did. We freaked out, completely lost it, and split from there. Thought that monster was after us. We each looked back, one by one. We were sure it was there, either jumping from one tree branch to another or hopping over the bushes. Now, whether it was really chasing us, I can't tell. It could have just been our imagination, fueled by how scared we were. Maybe it was just our body's way to keep going, even when we felt out of breath and our legs were tired. But what we found in the treehouse wasn't just our imagination, it was real. It was super creepy and just plain evil. Its big eyes and teeth told us all. We were in its territory and had been there for far too long. If it found us, we were toast. They would have torn us apart. Good thing we're quicker than we seem. We tried to warn our parents, but they just yelled at us for reeking of booze and cigarettes. They thought we were messing around outside, pretending like there was a monster. They got mad and punished us. We were stuck at home and had to do twice the chores. But honestly, I don't think any of us really gave a damn. We were okay, weren't we? They told us we couldn't leave the house for months. But even after years, all I wanted was just to stay in my bed. I went camping with my college buddies after we graduated. It was a last hurrah before we all moved away. We just planned to stay 2 nights at a popular and clean local park. It mainly had a beach for swimming. It wasn't a secluded, far-off wild place or anything, just a regular state park. We didn't expect anything to go wrong, so we weren't worried. We arrived on Friday night. The campsite was pretty close to the car park, not even half a mile. They had trolleys there that we could use to bring our stuff to the camp. We got our camp up and running in under an hour. Everything was going great. You know how in all those spooky stories about bad things happening in the woods, there's always a character who gets a creepy feeling but just ignores it. Well, nothing like that happened to us. There weren't any red flags. It was getting dark on that first night and we were all really hungry, but we thought we'd hit the beach for a quick swim before getting food. Most of the people who were there during the day had left, so we pretty much ended up with the beach to ourselves after sunset. Everything seemed normal, but right as we were about to leave, we all saw a white light over the lake. Initially, it seemed like the moon was reflecting on the calm lake water. We all just halted and stared at this light, kind of like we were hypnotized. The moon got covered by some clouds, but its light was still reflecting off the water. I kept looking, trying to understand why. I moved to go to the lake, but then my friend stopped me. She asked me what I was up to, and I was like, I have no clue. I can't tell you why I did it. I kept looking at the light. I couldn't help but be attracted to it. That's when I figured something was off, but I didn't realize it then. I didn't really think I was around anything bad. My buddy thought it was probably just a trick of the light or something, and I agreed with him. So we went back to our camping spot and cooked dinner over the fire. After a while, I pretty much forgot about the whole light thing. I was still curious about it, but not as much as when I saw it at the lake. We all had a great time at the campsite last night. It rained, but our tents were fine. The campsite was a bit wet, though, with water here and there. I only realized it when I was out for a walk that morning and found this pretty big puddle smack in the middle of the path. The water looked almost black, and in the middle of this puddle there was this light. It was the same light we'd seen in the lake the night before. That's when it became clear to me that the light wasn't a reflection from above, but something coming from underneath the water. I rushed back to the campsite to fetch my friends and show them the pool. But when we got there, it was just a regular pool of water. It was clear, not black, and there wasn't any light moving around inside. I ignored the weird incident, and we all headed out for our morning hike. We had a regular day, hiked about 8 miles, had a picnic lunch, and cooked dinner on the fire. We decided not to visit the beach that night. At around 3 a.m. on Sunday, the last day of our trip, I woke up to someone screaming from the woods. I quickly got out of my tent when I heard my friend. She was having another one of her nightmares. Just so you know, she often sleep talks and gets these bad night terrors. It's not common, but it does happen. It was kind of a relief knowing it was her and not someone getting hurt. We woke her up and tried to keep her chill while she figured out she was having another nightmare and everything was okay. I whipped up some coffee on the camping stove, and we all hung out in my tent. I asked what she was dreaming about. She just stared and said, "Something's in the water. Don't follow." I pressed her for more, but she couldn't or didn't want to explain. We tried to sleep again, but none of us could. I was curious about what happened in the water, but didn't want to upset my buddy more. It was probably just a nightmare, nothing serious. We all were pretty worn out the next morning, but still went hiking and had a great day at the park. We ate dinner early and began to pack up our stuff from the camp and take it all to the car. We didn't realize how long it would actually take to load everything, and it was almost nightfall by the time we finished. On our drive out of the park, we had to pass the lake. That's when I unexpectedly started to feel sick. I felt so bad I had to stop driving because I was sure I was going to throw up. Once I got out of the car, I felt okay again. But then I saw that weird white light over the lake. Something was moving under the lake and I couldn't stop staring. I was frozen. The light kind of stretched out like a snake and moved from the far end of the lake to the beach. Once it hit land, it just flopped down. It looked like a puddle, kind of like bottled moonlight, if you can picture that. The stuff began reshaping itself like it was transforming. Suddenly, someone gripped my arm and yanked me back into the car. My buddy was like I said, don't chase after it. After that, we just peaced out. I never went back to that park, and I still don't know what that light was. I asked my friend about her dream, and she simply said it was creepy. That's all.